Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Racing Together webinar. I'm pleased to say this is the second episode in the third series and our 13th overall, which will be lucky for all of us. I promise you that. And those of you who have joined us, I appreciate it's an earlier time. It's 11 o'clock or 11 Z's, as my late mother used to say. And I was thinking, what on earth does that mean? Apart from it's obviously 11 o'clock. But I learned, given the theme is education today, that 11 Z's was a term that was used when tea became affordable for the working classes. So there we are, we're 11Zs and 4Zs. I won't bore you with what 4Zs means because you can work that out. So the reason we're on at 11 o'clock is we're delighted to have a guest from Australia. Trish is joining us, still very late at night for her, but great that she's joined us. But the disciplines are still there. We'll only keep you for 45 minutes. So we'll be off air at 11:45. And it's very much an interactive session. So we want our guests to come in and on the chat with questions about this very broad subject. At the end, the recording will be available on our website and as a podcast as well. For those of you who colleagues may have missed out today, then please pass that over to them. As I say, it's the 13th episode, so over 60 panelists, hundreds of guests have come through this channel over the last couple of years or so. So we're extremely grateful of your support for Racing Together. And those of you who don't know quickly about Racing Together, it's the umbrella partnership for all the sports, community engagement, education work, a wide partnership of so many organizations and a few representatives here today. So we're delighted to bring you these webinars. And the next one will be in December the 7th, and more news of that at the end. But without further ado, let's get moving along. You've joined us today for a very big topic, a shared challenge, innovations in education and employment. We're limiting it to horse racing, but still it's an enormous bucket, isn't it, in terms of this topic. Just to say from the get-go, Dom Ellsworth, who's joined us, is going to leave us at 11:30 because he has important work to do today in the employment sphere. So you'll understand that we're very encouraging for him to do that. But we'll plenty of time to speak to Dom and for you to ask him questions as well. So without further ado, if I could ask Lee to start the introductions, please.
Yep, good morning. So Lee Mawson, and I work on a project called Racing Pathway, where we're looking at opportunities within racing from a non-rider perspective. So we helped launch the business administration apprenticeship with the BHA and Jill Greaves' team, also the Racing Media Academy, and most recently we've been working with ARC and the Stephen Lawrence Foundation on 4 apprenticeships at Lingfield Park.
Wonderful. And Dom?
Morning, yes, my name's Dom Ellsworth. I work for RMF Group. We are a provider of employment within the equine industry. So I basically run myself and Ryan Hatch, who's a former jockey as well. We basically train people that are unemployed within the Birmingham area, train them up for 6 weeks into the equine industry, and with the outcome being getting them jobs within the equine industry in various pathways. There's a lot of potential out there. It's not just working with the horses, but there's a lot of pathways out there. So we train them up for 6 weeks and then get them into employment or further training.
Wonderful. Sophie?
Yes, morning everyone. I'm Sophie Chambers. I work for Gallagher, who are a risk and insurance broker. I run the Bloodstock insurance team here, and I've done Bloodstock insurance for 40 years, but we won't tell anyone that because that makes me seem really old. And I was integral in setting up the community partnership with the Jockey Club to try and bring more diverse young people from poorer socioeconomic backgrounds into racing and give them an experience. And we'll talk more about that later, I'm sure.
And last but not least, Trish.
Sunny Sydney. Sunny Sydney in a few hours' time. So I am former vice chair of the Australian Turf Club, which is one of the largest racing clubs in Australia. And currently I'm on the board of Thoroughbred Breeders, New South Wales. And we have a thoroughly schooled program that we work in conjunction with the state government and other bodies in racing to educate people about the different potential pathways through breeding and racing.
Wonderful, from sunny Sydney. And for those of you who I've not met, I am John Blake, and I have the privilege of running the charity Racing to School, which in some ways I suppose is very much the first steps for a lot of our young people who hopefully will make their path through the sport, through to training and maybe employment as well. And we'll hear more of that as we go forward. So that's our esteemed panel. I'm sure those subscribing would be grateful to listen for 45 minutes to just one of this quartet, but we're going to split them out. And let's start with an easy one then. We talk about innovation. Are we innovative enough in terms of how we go about recruiting our workforce? And Lee, maybe if you don't mind, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, certainly. I think probably the things that we've all got in common is the fact that we're doing outreach with inner cities. So I feel like something that we've probably all learned is we can't expect people to come to us. We need to work with different partners and organizations that have access to young people, particularly when we're talking about diverse backgrounds, so that have built the trust in those areas. I think that we've got some really good established pathways, and it really is about sort of taking that message out there and sharing that. I think we've done some really good work, and I feel that, like, if collectively we could build on that and have probably a program that sits between what you guys do brilliantly at Racing to School and sort of that probably piece between sort of 13 to 16, I think that probably is where the opportunity lays.
And Dom, I mean, perhaps in some ways the other end of the scale in terms of some of the work you're doing now with RMF Equine, some of the people that you're trying to reach in some ways may think this sport of kings that we talk about is very much out of reach for them. Do you want to maybe describe some of the people that you work with and how you've sort of presented the sport as a real opportunity for them?
Yes, well, this is actually a pioneering project. It's only been going since January. We've had 120 people through our course since January, and it ties quite nicely in with what Lee's saying as well, that you're reaching out to an audience that's untouched. I mean, the amount of people that so I'm Birmingham, we're based in Solihull, so we would target in the city of Birmingham to get candidates through on our course. And the amount of people that have said that I've always wanted to work with horses or have something to do with horses, but I've never had the opportunity. And I always thought you have to have your own horse and you have to have a lot of money and, those sort of barriers that we see. And we're here to say that actually, no, you don't need to, because we can provide this sort of training for you to go on and find a future career within the sport. So it ties in quite nicely with what we're all realizing now, that we need to really reach out to people.
And Trish, obviously you bring obviously a hugely different perspective to this challenge in terms of where you're located and how racing is set up with you. But I'm sure you'd agree you're hearing things that you probably resonate with you in terms of that shared challenge. What's your perspective on where we are as a sport in terms of our innovation in reaching future colleagues, future employees?
I think that we've probably been going to the same pot too often and expect that it's a generational thing. And I think that one of the big challenges we have, especially in the market that I'm familiar with, is the perception of parents and guardians of people that we're trying to recruit into the industry and to show people this is what the industry is all about. And here are the various pathways. You don't have to be horse related, as Dom's already talked about. You don't have to have all that knowledge. You can actually be a participant in the industry without actually having to have handled a horse before. And I think that the challenge that I know the Silverdale Academy has is trying to get across to parents that it's not a dead-end job. that there's actually lots of different career pathways that come through. And I think that's the challenge for us at the moment, is to be able to take down some of the perceptions and remove some of the barriers that people perceive to be there, and enable people to understand that it's actually something that anyone can have a go at doing. Because, you know, I can remember going to the Spanish riding school in Vienna about 15 years ago, and they made the comment that they actually don't have anyone who knows how to ride join that organisation, because they want to teach them how to ride. They don't want how they want horses to be ridden. So it's a similar thing. It's like, you don't need to have a skill set, you just need to have some aptitude. And if we can get that going, then I think that's the positive that we can work with.
And I suspect, Sophie, that rolls very nicely into the motivation for Gallagher and to combine with both the Jockey Club and the Rio Ferdinand Foundation that sort of has given birth to your current project, which is, I would say, very innovative. Do you want to just explain why you firstly thought there was a need and a gap for it, and how it is working?
Yes, so Gallagher have been very, very involved in Premiership rugby, and they've worked with something called Project Rugby, which is exactly the same, not from an employment, but from a participation, to try and get young people who would never have otherwise held a rugby ball onto a rugby pitch, and see whether they can become, passionate rugby watchers or players indeed. And, that's been going since 2017, and they've had over 90,000 people be engaged in Project Rugby and get onto a pitch. So in the same way, we felt that racing needed, a little bit of help to try and get more of these people to understand that racing doesn't have any barriers and that anyone can go and watch it. So the Rio Ferdinand partnership that existed already with the Jockey Club was the ideal way to get us to get younger people involved and to try and break down these barriers. And one of the really interesting things that early came out of this was that a lot of these inner city children have quite a negative view of horses, because they're involved with authority, police horses, and military. So just to say to them, actually, no, horse isn't an authoritative figure. It's a horse to be loved was really important. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to just get some young people to see different parts of racing and the career opportunities that exist within it, which, as Trish and everyone's talked about, isn't just looking after a horse. It can be so many different and versatile roles within the industry, from media to secretarial to marketing, legal, insurance, all of it. Racing employs everybody.
And just staying with that experience, because Gallagher is a name synonymous with rugby for those of us who follow rugby as well, and the participation angle for lots of team sports obviously is a more natural fit than for horse racing in that way. What are you able to take from specifically, perhaps from the success of the rugby work that might work in racing, accepting that the barrier to participation, you don't play racing in the playground at lunchtime where you can throw a rugby ball around or kick a football or play cricket or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be harder to do. We've got to give them a really good experience, and we can only take less children at a time. So we've been working on our days with about 25, and the last one we did, we took them to John Joe's, and they had a very immersive experience. They didn't quite go in the horse pool, but let me tell you, AP and Barry were quite keen to throw a couple of people in. So, we've tried to just make it a fun experience. They got very up close and personal with these horses. One girl, it took me 5 minutes to get to stroke horse's nose, and within 15 minutes, she's just standing there hugging it, not wanting to leave. So we have to work quite a lot harder with a smaller amount of people, but we really want them to then come back and say, yes, we want to go racing. So we take them next to a race course and show them everything that happens at a race course. We give them a careers talk for a couple of hours. I bore them with a pitch about insurance, which actually is sometimes more interesting than people may think. But we then have to work hard on the follow-up as well and make sure these kids who have become really engaged can then find where they go next. And so the Jockey Club can take them racing. We can take them in insurance for a day. I'm sure that Lee and Dom, I can send them your way as well, because we're trying to get at lots of locations around the country. So we're at Aintree next week.
And Dom, that sort of leads on to my next question to you, really. I mean, you're again synonymous. You are much accomplished. Had an accomplished National Hunt career, Cheltenham Festival winners, of course. But obviously, the people that you're interacting with and you're selling racing to, for want of a better expression, they look at you and think, well, I'm not going to be Dom Ellsworth. I'm not going to be riding, in top races. How are you, given that challenge that Sophie said about the participation barriers that we have of racing? How do you go about, I guess, selling the sport from not just an employment point of view, but just as a concept before even talking about employment?
Well, first of all, we say it's a worldwide skill. We say, there's racing, obviously Australia and the Americas and your Dubai's, and we take them through the industry throughout the whole. We take them to stud farms. The Newmarket National Stud are brilliant with us. We'd always do a trip to the National Stud. We take them at a day at the races as well. So we'll take them behind the scenes at the races. Not going to the races and having bets and going drinking, but we'll get them into the paddock. Take them to the paddock, get them in more behind the scenes. We'll also go stand at the last fence as well. If we jump race, we'll all go stand at the last fence, because if you get people stood at the last fence, no matter how many, how big the field is, that blows people away. I've done it myself when I'm hosting people at the racecourse. But you get people stood at the last fence, and it blows people away. The speed, the power, and the distance, and how magnificent they are up close. So we'll take them there, and then we also take them to Ian Williams. Has been really good with this. He's only down the road, and so we take them to Ian Williams's yard for a look around there. So I mean, that sort of encapsulates the industry. But we do stress that it's not just yard management that you do. There are various different avenues, pathways within the racing industry, and we pull up on YouTube the careers in racing videos that are going around, to show them that there are various roles within the industry and the equine world. I mean, we had one guy come, and he wanted to be a cowboy, so he's doing his time with some racehorses, and he's going to go to America come sort of March time. That's when the ranches and those sort of places are really advertising for he's going to go off to be a cowboy. So everyone has their own sort of different ideas, and whatever their ideas, we sort of push them in that direction. But again, none of them have actually been with horses before, so it's really rewarding. And just going back to what I think you were saying, Sophie, that the girl was absolutely petrified, wouldn't go anywhere near the horse. We have a lot of that, because we're very hands-on. We have to handle these horses, and a lot of the people, well, some of the people, they're absolutely petrified going near the horse, even feeding it or anything, things that we take for granted. And then over the 6-week period, you see them just grow and grow and grow, and they get caught, and then they absolutely just smash it. They just smash it. And also not just smashing it with the horse, you see them grow as individuals as well, which is, with some of them, is absolutely beautiful.
And Lee, I'm sure that chimes with you in terms of your many hats, really. But I'm thinking of maybe the Racing Media Academy in terms of, Dom was saying, to encapsulate, get them up close and personal, get the experience, get the feel, the smell, the noise, get that, and then people, irrelevant of their background, will feel actually that's something that could be for us. It could be. And would that be a sort of a similar hurdle, if you like, that you have to jump when it comes to encouraging and recruiting your young people?
Yes, I think we've had people that have been on the Racing Media Academy, and although they've been fans of the sport, they've never seen or touched a horse. So I think the horse in itself is really powerful for us as a sport, I think, to help attract people. I think in terms of like the non-rider pathways, they aren't as well as established as the rider pathways, and I think that we probably have got some work to do creating those grassroots opportunities for young people, because there's some great work going on, as we've heard, like the likes of Gallagher. What they're doing is fantastic, and then we've got to make sure that there are opportunities that exist. So the Racing Media Academy obviously is one of those. We've sort of just started the 4 apprenticeships with ARC at Lingfield, which is another. And so I really do feel like, you know, we're getting quite good at outreach, but we've got to make sure that those opportunities are there for young people when they want to come and be part of our sport.
And that last initiative, Lee, is the Stephen Lawrence Foundation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. So so Racing had done a really great thing in supporting the Stephen Lawrence Day in April, and the team there asked us how could they, you know, continue their involvement with the sport, and they're very much about creating opportunity for young people that they work with. And we had a conversation with ARCRA, a partner of the Racing Media Academy, and we sort of just brought the two together, and that's how that was established. But I've been on a call with them this morning actually, and 50% of the people coming to the day where we're looking for those apprentices are from that outreach work, so, which is really fantastic. So yeah, I think the other thing that we need to consider is how we communicate with young people, making it easy for them to apply for opportunities and giving them different ways to apply. I mean, a lot of the communication now is by WhatsApp, and I feel that we probably need to change some of those ways in which we communicate with young people and give them the chance to apply. Traditional interviews, for instance, are, you know, just don't suit a lot of people. So it's thinking outside the box that way too.
Yes, we'll come back to that. The equality versus equity is one of the things I wanted to touch on a bit later, and I'll come back to you on that if I may. But Trish, just zooming out a little bit from the sort of, if you like, the more frontline programs and the innovation that we've been discussing. There's an industry challenge here in terms of not just recruiting, but retaining staff as well. But one of the post-Brexit issues that our country, one of the many issues our country faces, is obviously shortage of staff. And I know that the BHA have been putting forward to the Migration Advisory Committee that racing roles are on the shortage occupation list. And I just wondered from the Australian experience, and you know, whether government or state, what's your experience of that, the help or otherwise that you get for the industry over there? I think we're just missing you a little bit, Trish, there. Hang on.
And particularly at a state level. So there are supported programs, but similar, we also have horse handlers and skills required as with horses as skills that are needed in our industry. And there are programs with international, through the federal government, international programs that are looking to attract people from different markets across to our market. We have a very big population of Indian and Pakistani workers in the industry here in Australia, particularly the racing industry, not necessarily the breeding industry. But that's a proven pathway of bringing people through and providing them with skill sets and providing them with employment as well, so they can get sponsored residency in Australia based on them coming through to this industry. But I was talking to someone from a big stable a couple of weeks ago, and she told me that their number one strapper at the moment is someone who used to deliver, as an Uber driver, used to deliver coffee and bacon and egg rolls to the stable through COVID. And he asked one day if he could stay and hold a horse. And he held a horse, and now 15 months later, he's one of their better strappers. So it's that whole idea of just giving people that opportunity to sort of experience something that they haven't experienced, and to be able to say, yeah, I can do this, and this is something that I'm interested in. But we do get strong support from particularly the state government in terms of running programs for training, and because their goal is to skill people for industries that are understaffed, and this is one of them that is.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to draw on a question now. We've got several coming through. Thank you for the audience for asking. We'll try and get through as many as we can. I'm conscious of we've only got Dom for a little bit, so I'm going to pick on Dom. One of the questions is, someone said some great initiatives. Thank you for sharing. Should the industry do more to be joined up in this work? I mean, yours is a very pioneer. You used the word, I think, a pioneer program. Always with pioneers, they tend to be ahead, and the rest of us have got to try and catch up a little bit. What's your sort of view on how I know it's early days with you, it's February, wasn't it? But how the rest of us, if you like, can jigsaw in with what you're.
I think, well, it's one of the big things that we emphasize to these people, to our learners: teamwork makes the dream work, and that is the long and the short of it. If we all collaborate and combine and get our heads together, and that's the way to go forward and be successful. That's the long and short of it, John. To be honest with you, we need to all get together, all sit down, and all pull together and for the good of the sport.
And I think that is right, isn't it? Because we want the sport to outlive us all, in the nicest sense, don't we? We want to be able to. It's decades and decades along the way that we want this sport to be vibrant and attractive. And I suppose a lot of the programs, Lee and Sophie, and the work that Trisha's been across, we've spotted gaps, we've spotted opportunities. And Sophie, the joined up aspect of it, I think, you've been involved in the program now for a while, but I'm sure you're looking to, when those learnings, as we say, come out of that, and you prove the concept, to find a better way of guess mainstreaming it, for want of a better expression. Yeah,
I think it's one of the very early takes I had was that, whilst we could get 25 people on a day, how did we then mentor them, make sure that they followed the direction they wanted to go in, and how could we support them, and how joined up was it? So I did a bit of research, and something like 360 different racing charities. And they can be a little bit insular, they're working in their own location, and it's not necessarily joined up across the country, so that, until we're sitting here, Dom, I didn't know what you did, Lee, I didn't know what you did, and yet we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to get different types of people in to racing, to understand it and to want to work in it. And the Jockey Club did a really interesting bit of research. They talked to 1,000 children between the age of 12 and 18, and 40% of them were interested in a career in the industry. So that's a phenomenal amount. I was blown away. If 40% of our 12 to 18-year-olds want to work in racing, we need to find them and then give them a program, and that's probably got to go through education, through schools. We've got to get better at talking to schools about the opportunities that, aren't historically kind of what the schools want to do. They want to teach their kids maths and English. Well, the last time I looked, you didn't need maths or English to look after a horse. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm not sure we're going to solve that overnight.
And a question for you that links into that, Lee, sorry. Is there an opportunity for employers of all sizes to get involved with the apprenticeship program, Racing Pathway? And if so, how would they do that?
Yeah, so the business administration apprenticeship was developed with sort of racing add-ons, so that racing could be taught alongside the traditional business administration. That's run via Haddon, so any employer can have a business administration apprentice. They just need to contact Haddon, and there is support in Jill Greaves' team in the BHA too. In terms of if they're smaller, then there's something called the Levy Share Scheme. So if the employer wants the funding for the apprenticeship, they can go and ask someone else that's a levy payer to get that. So, you know, if they are small, that they can still get that funded. And if they're a levy payer, then they can actually use their levy to pay for the apprenticeship. So yeah, it's there, it exists. I know that there's been a handful of people that have gone through the apprenticeship already, and I know that Jill and the team in the BHA are really keen to sort of have more people. And one of those apprenticeships at ARC is another one of the business admin apprenticeships. So yeah, it's there. Please.
And we don't want it to be a secret, do we? I mean, this is
no,
the thing.
exactly. Yeah. You know, when it was launched, there was some comms out from the BHA team, but yeah, it's that continuous sort of education to everyone that these things are there to use and to have.
Great. I'm going to pull on another question, if I may. This is from Stan Wong, who I believe is a new colleague from the Racing Foundation, who's started with them quite recently. Welcome, Stan. Thank you for coming on board. And I'm going to put this to Trish, because you started talking about this earlier, Trish. And Stan's question is, how much outreach or engagement is done with parents and or community leaders to inform and educate them that job opportunities in the industry are viable for their children or students? Perhaps build on what you were telling us before.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because as has been recognised as a barrier to entry. The Thoroughly Schooled program, which is run by the breeders, it's run by the state government and run by Racing New South Wales, which is the regulator of racing in New South Wales, is a program that attracts parents first as part of the recruitment. It sort of communicates to parents through the schools. So we reach parents through the schools and offer the Thoroughly Schooled program. So it is one that actively engages with parents to enable them to understand that there are opportunities. Again, the Silverdale Academy, which is a philanthropic body that does a lot of training and a lot of work in this area, they actually have open days for parents to go to their farm, and they will show the different types of roles that kids can do, that kids can get into. They show them the amount of care that goes into looking after the horse and its welfare. And they then talk about the different pathways that are available for kids. So a lot of the work initially is done with parents, because you need to get them, you know, it's quite often thought, oh, you know, you work in a horse racing stable, it's because that's the only thing you could get a job to do, as opposed to, I chose to work in a horse racing stable because I think there's a career in it. And that's the sort of perception that we need to challenge, the one that it's the only job I could get, and we need to turn it into, no, that's the career I want to have. And I think we need to start talking about it as a career, not a job, that you can build your skill sets, you can build your responsibilities, and you can build your own sort of life if you follow a career through racing.
And just hovering on that point around parents, and I'm very, you know, my antenna is up a lot about that with regard to racing to school. We work with 9-year-olds and above, and you know, you always think, well, what do the parents think of sport, of the sport? Well, you know, what's their view of it? Whether it's gambling or drinking or demonstrations at the Grand National, whatever, you know, the things that we all shudder on and think, well, actually, that's not the real story here. Do you find, again, does that chime with you in terms of, you know, where is racing in terms of its society, you know, the approach of society to it, or the attitude to society?
I think that increasingly racing is losing its social license, particularly with a younger generation. And it's a younger generation that is exposed to more information. It might not be the correct information, but they access information, they access opinion, and they form their own because of it. There's a lot of work done here. Vicky Leonard does it with her Kick Up work, where it's challenging people's perceptions of what happens to a racehorse and what's involved in racing. And quite often we talk about here that you don't want to change a negative person's view to positive. You just need to neutralize them. So you need to have them move from a point where they're actively dissing the industry to actually not saying anything, because they can no longer argue against the facts that have been put in front of them. So that's a really strong push that's at the moment, and it was very evident last week with the Melbourne Cup Carnival, and very, very positive messages coming out and being able to challenge what people are saying. So I think it's, if you can take the emotion out of it and we can remain very objective, and it's very hard for people to push back when you're putting facts in front of them. And I think that's the sort of issue that we need to look at. One of our biggest problems at the moment is the very overt association of gambling with horse racing. So gambling is on the nose here at the moment as a social issue. It's infiltrated football, cricket, what we would call rugby league, rugby union, all those sports. And therefore it's getting a very poor perception. And generally people see that it started with horse racing. So it's kind of, oh, they started it all and their income is up because more people are gambling. People are gambling less on racing, ironically, but it's the one that's still getting pointed at as the one that actually causes the gambling in the first instance. So I think those are the challenges we have. There are societal challenges that we need to sort of really address. And again, we don't have to convince people, we just need to neutralise their perceptions so that they don't talk against it, and we can find people who can talk positively.
I mean, it's an extremely good point about gambling. It's a personal hobby horse of mine in terms of educating young people about the potential harms in a positive way, because if racing does not have a voice in that conversation, then other people will, that are not going to suffer the downturn that racing will if we just leave it as some sort of vacuum. You know, you've seen the way over here the sport is marching behind signing a petition to ensure that the government be sensible about introductions and revision of the current Gambling Act. You know, there's a real power behind that, and you think, well, to my view, that has to be in tandem with the education piece around. But actually, we do care as a sport about those that suffer in that way, and that young people, their resilience and their education. If it doesn't come from racing, and I know rugby do a lot of work in that, and football and cricket as well, but I think racing is a bit very, very slow on that front. That's my own personal view. But Dom, we've still got you, which is brilliant. Your hands up. You're going to say you're going to go, or have you got something?
No, I'd just like to add to Trish. We find for when I have people come to join our course, especially around the Grand National time, we had a lot of people that had a lot of negative views about it, even though they're on our course. And it was educating. I would be myself and Ryan Hatch would be educating, you know, about the Pro Crush whip, about its cushioned, and it's the perception the public get that using the whip, it's Pro Cush, that it hurts the horse. Now, the last thing as a jockey, last thing you're going to do is want to hurt a horse. You love them. You give so much of yourself to that horse, and when we educate them, they're neutralized. They are neutralized, and they're like, oh right, okay, and they're perfectly happy about it, and they go away, and hopefully they'll tell the next person, will tell the next person, you know. So it's educating the public, it's educating people, and it all starts with education, and we have a responsibility to do that, don't we?
Yeah, and I think sometimes we talk to ourselves a lot, and we talk amongst ourselves, and we feel really good about it, but it's like we don't need convincing.
Yeah,
we know. It's the general public that needs the education and neutralizing of views.
I'm going to change tack just slightly here, because, as I said, it's a huge subject. We could talk for hours on it, but just on the employment piece. So we've talked about some of the innovations and some of the programs we're all involved within. Young people, students, people on the cusp of employment, people getting back into employment. But once we've got them, once they've are in the sport, how do we keep them? Because we know there's an attrition problem, and we can talk about paying conditions and various things. But is there anything? And I'll throw this to any of you to start with. Is there any views on how we can, you know, better support our workforce, so that actually they themselves become they amplify the good things about being employed in the sport, because they've had careers, they've progressed in a way which has suited them, they've been able to make a living, etc. Anyone want to dive in about how we can perhaps work with our colleagues to stop the attrition rate that we have around the sport?
I think I can just have a couple of words on this because you know, working in a corporate industry, you know, we're very mindful as well of people being given opportunities to develop their careers, learn new skills, and move freely around different positions within the organisation. And I think racing tries to hold on to its staff, you know, because they know that if they lose one, it's going to be hard to replace them. And I think that there should just be more opportunity within every racing, whether it's in a yard or on a stud, that look, you can do more, and providing them with the tools to go and learn about different aspects of the industry, because then they're going to spend their whole life developing a career and they'll find the path that suits them the most. Whereas nobody wants to start off thinking I'm a stable lad at 17 and I'm going to be a stable lad at 57. So I think all employees have some responsibility to show the opportunities that exist outside the one thing that they're doing at that moment. And then people will move around more freely. So I think that would be a really good first step, that employers are all more open to educating their own staff.
I think, Sophie, that's a great point, and you know, I know which ones are wanting to upskill their workforce, and they do actively do it, and that's a very good thing. You're showing that you're adding value to the staff, to the person, and also to your workforce as well. And it's something that's, you know, should be really sought after and really pushed forward for the employers. You know, the ones that aren't, unfortunately, and you know the ones that are.
I think I totally agree with your point, Sophie, and also like giving people the chance to like learn transferable skills, because I think we have to accept that, you know, you might get sort of closer to 30 and think riding a horse isn't for me any longer. But if you've developed sort of skills alongside working in a yard that means that you could go into an admin role or something like that, then I think that would help a lot. And maybe sort of looking at the titles that we give people. So, you know, having them more aligned to actually what they would represent in the corporate world. You know, people that are in senior positions, essentially they are part of a senior management team. And I think that, you know, if we could sort of change some of that terminology, I think that would certainly help with that conversation that we were saying with parents and guardians. Actually, you know, within 6 years they could be at manager level. Now that's a completely different conversation with a parent and guardian than saying that, you know, that they might be a head person or something like that. So I think that's something that we could do really positively as an industry.
And Trish, one of the innovations over here has been Racing Home, which is working with others, with partners, to try to support working families in the sport, but people that want to have a career break, have children, raise a family, but still feel the sport is for them and they can come back into the sport. And you know, it is a challenge with the nature of, it seems, 24/7 racing that we have. Share with us again your experience in Australia about how some of those issues are being addressed.
One of the ways that I mean, obviously one of the difficulties is the way that training particularly is early morning, late afternoon, and nothing during the day, which always, to me, I can never quite work out why. But I understand, of course, with races on and traveling and all those sorts of things. A lot of the studs have actually started to work with split shifts and job sharing, particularly with new mothers, so that they will have 2 or 3 people who do one role over a week. They're also doing shifts where you get weekends off, and you can have this weekend rather than, so you might work 12 days out of 14, but it won't be a Saturday and Sunday that you work. You'll get a weekend off. So they're trying to address some of the, I guess, the unsocial aspects of working with horses in racing and or breeding, in that we know they need 24/7 care and looking after, but how can you manage that in a way that it's not the same people that are carrying the burden all the time? So having shifts that are friendly to dropping kids off to school and picking up kids after school basic things like that, which corporates have been doing for a long time in order to retain staff and being able to have sort of family-friendly practices. Those are the sorts of things that I look at every day in my corporate world, and we've got those programs happening so that we can have staff that can be flexible. We need to be able to work out how we do that in a way that can work for breeding and racing. And I guess it's the larger stables that are able to trial those things and are able to manage those things better than the smaller businesses. And that's the issue, I guess. You've got a couple of really big ones that can do it, and then you have a whole lot of smaller ones for whom that would be a big challenge.
Well, a shared challenge indeed. I cannot believe where the last 45 minutes has gone, but gone it has. Huge thanks to the panel. Dom, thanks for staying with us. I hope that hasn't made you too late for the job centre. As I said, you're not applying for a job, you're supporting others today. Huge thanks to Trish. Have a good rest of your night, what's left of it. Sophie, wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for your contribution. Lee, as ever, we could have spoken for hours about so many things, but thank you so much for all the support today. As you'll see on the screen now, thank you for all of those who asked questions. Sorry if I missed one or two of them out. The next episode is December the 7th. We'll be looking back on some of the impact of the programme, so many programmes of this year. A shameless plug for the Racing Together Industry Day, which is on February the 8th. Very much looking forward to that. Some exciting news around that in terms of speakers and sponsors, and some good stuff that will come out. But thank you so much for those of you who subscribed again. As I said, our 13th episode, I think, went fairly well. No mishaps, hopefully. And a recording of this will be available on our website, a podcast as well. And please share that as well. So just after Q2, I just want to say thank you so much again to our great panel for really setting so many hairs running in a positive direction, so many shared challenges and great food for thought as well. So conversations, of course, that we'll all pick up in due course, but I hope it was informative to those of you who subscribed today. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.